Okay, I am back talking about the fears people have diving into processing the deeper stored emotions that might hold them back, or joining the release course, which is what I focus on. What I teach people is how to process their emotions. So I had a little break because there were 5 top fears that came through that many people asked me, and I wanted to speak to them this time around. And I had a little break and I shared an awesome testimonial from someone who from the lovely Jacob, who really wanted to join the release course 3 years ago when I first started it, and said, got too much shit going on, don't have the money, blah, blah, blah. Joined half an hour later, and 3 years later, we're still working together, and he has collapsed time and had amazing, amazing milestones. So go and check out that testimonial. Go and watch the video, which shares with you how it all started even years before that. So now I'm back into the fears. I know it's a little bit negative, but I think it's good to speak to these. So fear number 4 is that it will be difficult to keep up with the course as a sensitive empath. I may spend a lot of time in overwhelm, which can be really disruptive to my roles in my life. Okay. And I believe I cater really well for this on the release course. And part of this is because of one of the pillars I teach is Ayurvedic doshas. So I teach people how to process their emotions using the release process, how to identify what emotions you're storing so that you can process them. And I use the chakra system. And then the third one is using Ayurvedic doshas to understand yourself and how you're going to respond to the deeper emotional work, as well reconnect with your true nature. Now, things like chakras and Ayurvedic doshas, you may have heard about them before, but I teach them in a completely different way and a very integrative way. So the way I run my courses, and I'm going to share a little bit more about this dosha and this constitution, is it caters for many different types of personalities, constitutions, and the way people are ready to interact or not. So I don't want to get into the logistics because I think it's really boring. You can read about it on the page. You can reach out and ask me questions via a message. But I'm actually very intentional and mindful of how I put all of my programs together so that it can cater to different people's needs at different times in a way that feels good for me. When I got into doshas, I realized, well, people have got all these different makeups and constitutions. And you can dive in even deeper when there is more individual consultation happening. But there are people that are going to operate better in one-to-one versus groups. There are people who are going to love the energy of a group and they're going to be quite extroverted. And there are other people that get paralyzed in front of a group. There are some people who get very overwhelmed with the emotional work, and then all of a sudden it causes a bit of shutdown. And what I see happen is that people dive in, they want to make the most of it. They want to make the most of their investment. They push, push, push. And then there's like a few weeks over the 6 weeks where they just check out. I'm like, hello, are you there? And then they kind of crawl out of bed and go, all right, I'm back. That was just a lot. I'll talk about the few and then I'll go back to the overwhelmed state. Then there are the people who are like, let's dive in, give me more. I want to purge. I want an exorcism. I want to get this stuff out of my body, and you better go fast because I will too. And then there are the other personality types that will tend to want all of the information. They're very cross their T's, dot their I's whenever it comes to contracts and administration. They want to know all the details. And by having all these details, they believe that the more they know, the more perfect they're going to get it the first time round. And so what often happens here is they don't get started because they feel like they don't have all the information. And I promise I give you all the information. It is a simple process. It is not easy. And it's really beautiful to be in a group with all of these different constitutions and personality types and watch them play out. Because quite often we think, oh, if only that person was like me. If everyone in the world was like you, the world would be incredibly boring. So we need these people who sometimes get into overwhelm, the ones that are just ready to drive and go all in, and the ones who like to analyze and make sure they've got everything right. There's pros and cons. There's nothing wrong with this. But that's why I love Ayurvedic doshas, and the way that I teach it is because it helps you understand yourself and why it is you respond the way you do to the deeper emotional work. This is something that really helped me and still does when I'm working with people, to be able to adapt and not say that my way and this way of doing it is the only way. I definitely, because of knowing my own self, I know I have definitely had experiences where in the past it was easier and it was more fun working with certain types of people. But when I became aware of how to work with the different personality types, it didn't have to become, well, why isn't my way not working? It became, how can I adapt to be able to support this person where they're at on their journey and what is in alignment for their true nature? So that may be the speed at which we go. That may be like the way they process their emotions can be very different in terms of what they feel and what they visualize and what they see. And so I always love teaching by real life examples, which is why I love a group. I love the energy of group. I love how someone will crop up with something and I'm there to teach and coach and say, hey, this is this dosha that's really been expressed right now. And sometimes our doshas go out of balance. They're always fluctuating and finding an equilibrium, but seasonally, day to day, week to week, they're going to change. And it is being able to recognize, okay, well, is it physical? Is it emotional? Is it chakra? Is it energetic? Is it a dosha imbalance? But not to, so many people will learn Ayurveda and doshas and just go, oh, my dosha's out of balance. And actually they're focusing on the wrong thing. It is something emotional for them to work on. So that's where I like to be able to, based on the interaction with people live in the release course, is say, well, this is what I think is going on. And a lot of the time it comes back to processing your emotions, but sometimes it is actually about balancing out your dosha. Because the thing with our constitution is it helps us understand ourselves and make choices that are for us versus what marketing and advertising might tell us, like what diet to follow. So I say that I will follow bits of a paleo diet, I will follow bits of a raw diet, a vegan diet, a keto diet, a carnivore diet. They're bits and pieces, they're not, you can't have all of those as a particular diet, but you can pick and choose the bits that work for you based on understanding yourself. And so many people want to dive into emotional work to help others, their kids, their family, their partner. But this work always starts with yourself. Understand yourself first. You can understand others. Do this work for yourself, and everyone around you responds. So there is a particular dosha type that is more likely to get into overwhelm. And I tend to speak to that. And usually you've got to come on and just say, this is my tendency. And let's change that experience on this course if you choose to jump on. So the other part to this was, take it slow, and it links in with the previous fear 3, which was, what if I don't let go of what I planned to or what I wanted to on the release course on the 6 weeks? It's letting go of the expectation. You can go and listen to that video. I won't go into it again, but it is taking it at a pace that your nervous system can handle, maybe stretches it a little bit, but doesn't tip you into overwhelm that you completely check out. But we'll talk more about that dosha type and what happens there, and you'll learn about it on the release course. So the next part is, how do I keep up with it as a sensitive empath? And there are people that are going to find it hard to have their videos on in a group call, who find it a little bit more challenging to listen to other people's issues when they share. And I never want people to have to hold back because of protecting others, because then the responsibility comes back to ourselves. I always will call people out when they use I'm a sensitive empath as a reason as to why they feel like they can't show up in the world. Now, I'm not talking about this particular person, but I've heard it over and over again, particularly in the practitioner world. Oh, I had to leave because I was just such a sensitive empath and I kept on taking other people's stuff. So it is your own responsibility to be aware that you're a sensitive empath, but that you do not need to be responsible for taking on other people's energy. I know that if I ever see a therapist or if I have a friend, I do not want that friend or therapist to take on my energy, my emotions. I want to keep them to keep their energetic boundaries so that they can actually help me. I don't want them to get enmeshed into my story. So this, yes, we can be empathetic. We can be empathetic, but we do not need to get enmeshed into someone's story, because then we can't really help them. as much as we potentially could when that happens. So I like to speak about the words that people use to identify, label, or diagnose themselves with, and how much they're living into that. And being an empath is an amazing quality to be an empath, but you do not need to be an empath that takes on other people's stuff. So this usually has to do with the fact that you might have a lot of stored emotions. It is easy to deal with other people's issues rather than your own. And this is about learning how to set your energetic boundaries. Everything around energetics for me is around the experience of. It's not something that I can teach you right now. You've got to go through the experience to understand what it feels like to hold an energetic boundary. So by learning to process your emotions and emptying out your emotional cup, you present yourself with a completely different energy. There are always going to be people who will test and push your boundaries, and they will know whether or not they can test and push your boundaries. And sometimes they don't even have to try and test. They just know that you're going to hold a no. They don't even need to ask you. So sensitive empaths work on energetic boundaries. And how do you do that? You learn how to process your emotions.